Hey you, and welcome. In this video, we will talk about props in React. So let's dive right into it. So what are props? Well, let me show you a problem here. If I go to App TSX, this is my code, by the way. I have it open, my app. From previous video, we had created the React app, and that's what this code is. I also have my terminal open. If I go to my iterm, I have my npm start script running that started the server, and the browser on the right hand side. So just so we're clear, this is the setup at the moment. And if I go to app.tsx of my app, there's a paragraph on number 9, that's the component. Let's say I want to use that component twice, and each time I use it, I want to pass a message to it. I want to tell what the message should be that it should render, rather than it saying this is a paragraph, which is almost useless to me. So how do we do that? That's where props come in. In paragraph component, and let me dive into it, we can use the keyboard shortcut for Command B. I think that's the keyboard shortcut. If you don't know your keyboard shortcut, you can do Command Shift P and jump to definition. I think it's called definition. Go to definition, not jump to definition. In my case, it's Command B, but in your case, it may be something different. That's what I'm doing to go into these components without having to use my mouse. Save some time. All right, so in this component, in the paragraph, I can accept some props. Initially, when the props are passed down to any component, it's passed down as an object, and we can accept that as one of the arguments, the first argument and the only argument that's passed to the component in React, and we can name it whatever. In this case, I will name it props. Name doesn't really matter. You can call it arg, you can call it Mickey, doesn't really matter. Convention is that we call it props, so that's what I'm going to call it. Next thing would be, what is this prop going to be called inside the object? That's the props object. So I will take away this is a paragraph and start my JSX JavaScript curly braces and start writing props dot and whatever the message would be. In this case, I will just call it message. And you will notice that it's complaining. The reason why it's complaining is because we're using TypeScript. In JavaScript, this would have worked just fine, no problem whatsoever. In TypeScript, however, we are strictly typing our code. That means props is unidentified at this moment. It has an implicitly type of any. So how do we type our props in React? Well, the way to do that is on the first line where we do import React, I can do comma right after React and curly braces. Now we're destructuring out of the library, and there's something called function component. We take that function component, and right before the equals to sign, after the paragraph, which is the component name, I'll put a colon in this case, and then paste function component. Now you'll see the message has changed slightly. Instead of props giving me trouble now, the message is giving me trouble. So what it's doing is, now that we have typed the component to say this is a functional component, it knows that there will be props. However, inside the props, it's not familiar with a key called message. So we have to give it an interface. Remember, props is a type of object, and in TypeScript we learned that interface is also referencing an object. So that's what I'm going to do. I will create another line, call it interface I'm going to start with I, but you can call it anything. Paragraph props, curlies, and now we have started an interface. And message would be a type of string. So that's what we want the function component to know, that this props component, the props object will have a message key, which will be a type of string. Let's copy the name paragraph props. Let me just correct that and put that inside function component. We will start diamond brackets, paste that in, and that should fix my code. Let me just make it a little bigger so we can see the whole thing in action. So we have paragraph component, which is a function component, and diamond brackets, which is generics. We didn't really cover generics in TypeScript, but all we're going to do is follow the documentation from React, and that's what it says is we're going to pass an interface or pass a type inside diamond brackets, and function component will then know the props will be a type of this interface. And now it doesn't complain anymore. If I save that, that's good. All right, next thing. It's still complaining on the right side in the browser. Reason for that is because we're rendering paragraph on app.tsx, and we're not passing it props. So we're expecting props, which are mandatory props. Remember, in the paragraph.tsx, This is not optional. We didn't put question mark. That will solve the problem on the right side. This is mandatory. That means when you render a paragraph, you have to pass me a message prop. So I'm going to take away optional and go back to app.tsx and pass each paragraph a prop. When you pass a prop in JSX, they go as a form of attribute. Remember in HTML, when we write a tag, you would provide it href equals to some link and then close it. That href would be an attribute, equals to sign, and the value of that attribute. In this case, prop work pretty much similarly, and TypeScript would help us out here. So when I press space here, I think, and start typing message M, you would notice that it starts telling me that there is a prop being used, which is message. I can press enter, and then I can provide my message. I'll say hello world, and in the second one, I'll say hello earth. Save that. There we go. So we are successfully passing props from our app.tsx to our paragraph.tsx component. And that's how props work in React. Now there is enhancement to be made here. In the paragraph.tsx, remember that we are expecting props as one of the arguments of our function component. There is another method to destructure them out. So instead of me saying props.message on line number 8, I can just say message. And that's a common practice. I see it in many code bases. It does confuse the beginners somewhat. So I just wanted to show you that. So if I go to line number 7, I'll go to the end of this line. And in props, I will start my curlies and do a line break at this point. So remember, we're inside the curlies. That's destructuring. So we're getting the items out of the object. And if I start typing, TypeScript would help me out. It will just IntelliSense me that maybe you're looking for a message key in this case. Yes, that's true. And save that. So that also works. And the reason for that is because in JavaScript, if I have an object, const obj, and that thing has something as value and key, in obj, instead of me saying obj.sum, I can also say destructure out sum, and I can use that somewhere here. So that's what this is that we are destructuring directly in the function, the parentheses, and that's possible to do. There is another thing that we could do is spread operator, rest. That would give you rest of the properties that you may eventually add into the component. That is very common as well. The usage of that would be when you're trying to extend a component, which in our case, the paragraph is extending a component. So let me show you what I mean. If I was to add another attribute to paragraph tag that it takes, for example, style. I know HTML supports style, JSX also supports style, and if I start providing style in JSX, I have to provide it as an object, and it can be, I don't know, background color. Let's do black so we can actually see it, right? So you can see on the right side the background color change, and I provide a style. Now let's say in my props I wanted to pass the style for every paragraph different. So one of them can be black, the other one could be red, so on and so forth. And if I want to do that, I have to now specify here in the TypeScript, style would be type of an object. There's of course different typing for it, but for now let's just stick with the object. And then when you do that, you have to also destructure that here and then pass it as an object with one curlies, not two curlies. Save that. And then in your app.tsx, you have to pass style like so. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I did it right? I think so. Background color, yes, I did. Okay, and then copy that over to the next one and call it red. This should work. However, there's extra work being done here. As you can see, not in the hero.tsx, in the paragraph.tsx, we had to destructure style and then we had to pass it. That's too much style. That's style being used about three different times, 4 different times, kind of redundant. So another way to do it would be don't destructure style out of the props in the parentheses, and don't pass it down like this where style equals to style. Take that away, and instead start curlies, ... rest. So what does that mean? Well, in the first case, when message was destructured, but the rest of the keys were stored in rest. So rest value right now would be something like this, where it has style and then an object and background color, so on and so forth. So rest is an object, and that object has keys that may be used as attributes for the p tag. And that's what's happening here. We're spreading that out. The object will be spread out. So it would basically say style equals to style, and later on if we were to add something else, let's say on click equals to on click, that's what it's doing for us behind the scenes when we use pattern like this. Right, this is very common, so just thought I would give you an introduction to it. We will see that in the future as well. All right, I'll see you all in the next video.